She didn't say her. There you go. You're late, owl. Anyway, let's start with a word of prayer and make sure you have a Bible in arm's reach. I tried to make sure that there are Bibles in arm's reach just about all around the room. And let's get into the book of Galatians. Ooh, Lord, it has been a week, but I am grateful that we get to come and listen to your word and hear what you have to say. Help us as we work our way through the book of Galatians to hear what it is to be in the church and to grow up into the head, which is Jesus Christ, and to learn more about the beginning of the church and some of the struggles that they faced. In Jesus' name, amen. So who had a chance to get a hold of the book? This is the first thing that instructors always do. Textbook check. We got our hands on the book. Okay, fantastic. Art, that was.
What?
Did you have a journey getting your hands on the book?
Oh,
just your reaction to that was just.
I was raising my hand. You asked the question.
Well, I mean, marvelous. Okay, fantastic. And yes, Andrew, again, the enthusiasm is greatly appreciated. And did y'all have a chance to work through the first couple of chapters? Just checking. Okay, good. No? Great. Okay, marvelous. Well, we're going to take a look at those. And this because like usually I do that thing where I print up the questions I'm going to do on my little study guide, and this is already a study guide.
Yeah.
So I had this moment of crisis where I'm like, what do I do? Do I make a study guide for the study guide? And then decide we're just going to let NT Wright drive the car, and we're going to work our way through things as he has written. I will manage things because we have 2 lessons to get through. I'm going to manage things relative to the amount of time that we have, but I want to try to prioritize looking at the passage itself in scripture as much as possible, because I think it definitely offers us a lot to chew on as we unpack things here. So I wanted to start out with his opening at the beginning of the book where he talks about getting the most out of Galatians. And I just want to read this really short passage here. And I want you guys to sort of swim in this for just a second. Imagine you're in South Africa in the 1970s. Apartheid is at its height. You are embarked on a risky project to build a community center where everybody will be equally welcome, no matter what their color or race. You've designed it, you've laid the foundation in such a way that only the right sort of building can be built, or so you think, but you are called away urgently to another part of the country. A little later, you get a letter. A new group of builders are building on your foundation. They have changed the design and are installing 2 meeting rooms with 2 front doors, one for whites only and one for blacks only. And some of the local people are mightily relieved. They always thought there was going to be trouble putting everyone together like that. Others, though, asked the builders why the original idea wouldn't do. Oh, said the builders airily, that chap who laid the foundation, he had some funny ideas. He didn't really have permission to make that design. He got a bit muddled. We're from the real authorities. This is how it's got to be. That was the sort of situation in which Paul found himself almost 2,000 years ago in what is now South Central Turkey. He was building with people, not bricks and mortar, laying the foundation of the good news. The one creator God had unveiled his long-awaited plan for the world in his son Jesus, who is executed by the Romans, but raised by God. The good news doesn't end there either. Jesus' death and resurrection mean that God is now building a new family, a single family, a family with no divisions, no separate races, no Jews at this table and Gentiles at another. Afterward, others came in saying Paul didn't really know what he was doing. He didn't have proper authority from the apostles in Jerusalem. Yes, we all believe that Jesus is the Messiah, they said, but we can't have Jewish believers and Gentile believers living as though they were part of the same family. If the Gentile believers want to be part of the real inner circle, they have to become Jews first. So Paul was so incensed that he wrote a sharp letter to the Galatians. One of the first, perhaps the very first that Paul ever wrote to one of the young churches he planted on the eastern rim of the Mediterranean. That means this book that we are about to start working through, Galatians, is among the very earliest documents we possess from the beginning of the church's existence. And then to put that into context, there's widespread agreement that the epistles were written before the Gospels. We are looking at one of the oldest, maybe the oldest document for the New Testament in the Bible. Did you know that about Galatians?
No.
No, I was kind of like, oh, Galatians. Like because I'd always sort of thought like Galatians was just, that book that sort of comes after Corinthians, and everybody reads Corinthians at weddings, and Galatians was just there. And I had not thought about its importance historically at all, especially given the idea. I mean, what do you think about the fact that the thing that he is dealing with in this book, the problem the first church document was written to address, is prejudice?
We're still dealing.
Right? I mean, I am so horrified and reassured by these two facts, because it tells me this was something that church leadership worried about, that it mattered to them, that it was something that was worth addressing. And given the fact that we are still fighting with it today, it put Galatians in a new light for me. And it's changed the interpretation that I'm carrying forward with it a little bit. And I'm curious to see this as we go through his questions today, if you had a similar experience. Does it sort of change in the way that you look at things? Let's start out, and he has this lovely little question that he opens the very first chapter with, where how do you determine whether a teacher or preacher is trustworthy? And I think that we're going to unpack that a little bit, but I want to get right into the first reading. Who could or would be willing to read Galatians chapter 1, 1 through 9 for us, please and thank you. Who is willing? You got it, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, fire away. 1 through 9.
All of this will not be men nor by man, but by Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brothers and sisters to the church in Galatia. Grace and peace with you, God our Father and Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins, to rescue us in the present evil stage, according to the will of our God and Father, whom be glory ever. Amen. I am astonished that you are called quickly deserting the one who in the grace of Christ who are offered to the gospel, which there is really no good gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and you're trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we are an angel from heaven, we should preach the gospel other than when we preach you, that's merely God's truth. As we have already said, now I will say again, if anybody preaching you a gospel, then what you accept in the end of God's curse.
Wow. Okay. I want you to imagine opening your email or getting a letter from somebody in the mail. And you open it up. And it's from a friend of yours. And he's like, hey, it's been a long time. I haven't seen you guys for a while. What's wrong with you? Isn't that kind of the vibe that we're getting here, Paul? Like, so when you compare this letter to Corinthians, like when you look at this, like in contrast to Romans, he's like, Roman church, you're so amazing. I love you. I can't wait to visit you. Galatians, he's like, what is the matter with you? He just kind of comes out swinging right at the beginning. So the Galatians are kind of like, oh no, what did we do when they dig into this? Now N.T. Wright starts out with a couple quick questions here that I want to entertain very quickly on page 10. First of all, he asks, what does Paul stress about his own apostleship? What did you guys get down for your answers here on this? What does Paul stress about his own apostleship right here at the beginning of this?
He was commissioned by God and Jesus, not by man.
Mhm.
Hierarchy.
Right. He's commissioned by God. And again, specifically, like again, the trend, hang on, let me see, because I passed out a couple different books. I'm using the New Revised Standard Edition, and the way it renders it, sent neither by human commission nor from human authorities, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead. Why do you think he wants to establish that authority at the beginning of this letter? Why would that be important?
Because they were preaching something different.
Yeah. Somebody else was claiming a different authority. Somebody else was, and again, if you look at the way, like in this, as we get deeper into chapter 1, he starts going through some of his additional qualifications. So it sounds like he had maybe heard something where he had helped establish the church in Galatia, and they were then beginning to question his qualifications as an apostle, the qualifications of his teaching. Where did he get this vision of the gospel that he taught us, where Jew and Gentile are supposed to be side by side as we navigate the world instead of at separate tables? And he comes out, I mean, this may sound like boilerplate from the desk of the Apostle Paul. Hello, everybody. But it's not that. This is him coming out swinging. He's like, I am the Apostle Paul, and I was made an apostle by Jesus personally. That is where my authority comes from. And he does that right before he then turns on the table saw and slowly starts to feed the church through the table saw. And in the next few verses, again, he is Paul. This is the angriest I have ever seen any of. I mean, really, if you look at the other epistles, I cannot find another instance of him being this mad at all anywhere else in the scripture. That's a very interesting thing, because if this was the first epistle, like that's his opening note, is anger. Okay, next thing. How had the Galatian church shocked Paul? What had they done? Nancy, as you chuckle, go ahead.
Well, I think Paul came loaded
Yeah,
with
okay.
ammunition. He knew that things were not going as he expected
Yeah.
them to. But I don't think he realized how bad it really was. I mean, they were separating
Yeah.
and yeah.
That's good. That's a good start. Like, I mean, he's clearly upset. He's coming with his boxing gloves. This is kind of like him slowly taking off the boxing gloves, and he's going bare knuckle here a little bit. And so they're doing something that he doesn't want them to do, and the way he describes it is what? How does he say it here in these verses?
They're turning to another gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A different vision of what this is supposed to look like, a different picture of the gospel. And I've heard people debate about what that could be, but I think we get some clues about what this different gospel is in much greater detail as we look at the next few verses, and we really begin to see what those other teachers are, I think, echoes of what those other teachers had been teaching. What could possibly be attractive to people about a gospel that involved becoming a member of the family of Moses? So as we know that there was pressure to kind of go back to sort of Jewish laws and teachings here, and that's one of the things that he's getting grumpy about. Why might people be motivated to kind of go back to Jews sit here, Greeks sit here? You need to be circumcised. You need to follow the laws of Moses. You need to keep kosher. Why would these things be attractive to people? And why would that have created a problem? What's the allure of this?
Well, that's what they were used to. That's what they were comfortable with.
Right.
They don't like change any more than anybody
No.
does.
No?
And this whole gospel of Christ is
Yeah.
calling us to change.
Yes. So it's a call back towards something more comfortable, something that even if it's not comfortable, because I feel like comfort gets a bad rap sometimes amongst churches. But when we're taking a look at this,
Expected.
yeah, it's expected, and they're sort of putting on old shackles again,
Yeah.
which he's going to use some of that slavery terminology here in just a second. what else might be an allure to kind of go back to the Jewish way of doing things?
Mhm.
Because I mean, it's kind of the old traditional way we've done it. So I had pop up back there, go ahead.
Jews like to be, they like to be in charge. Or, and not just because they were Jewish, but I mean, this is just a human
Yes.
trait. Have somebody else to look down on.
That's true. That's one of the benefits of prejudice is it gives us somebody to punch down to. Talk about that more, but Michael, out of the corner of my blurry eyes, I saw your head. You kind of popped it up real quick. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Superiority. I mean, we quietly like to think we're better than everybody else. The Jews thought they were God's chosen. Not really clear on what that meant, so let's be better than everybody else.
And you see how all those things are interconnected? It is comforting to have someone to punch down to. It's comforting to have, okay, we have all these rules to follow. It's what we're used to, and it makes me feel like I'm in control. And at that time, there was a lot of loss of control in the Jewish community. I should probably double check the dates on exactly when this was written, but I mean, we're not that far off from the destruction of the temple on one side of it or the other.
About 50 AD.
So before,
So this is just a bit before it, but there's still a lot of political unrest, which is what ultimately led to the destruction of the temple, right? So things are not stable, like politically at all whatsoever. And the Jews are in a place in Palestine at that point where Rome was putting a lot of pressure on them, right? By gathering more followers, by forcing people to live the way that you live, it creates that sense of stability and it gives you the illusion of control. And it gives you that sense of being higher up on the totem pole than somebody else.
But it also was comforting to them that they all were together as a family.
Yeah, right.
And that, when you start rocking the boat,
Who are these other people?
Yeah.
Why are they coming in here? Why do they have to eat at the same table that I'm eating?
exactly.
So it's almost like there's more than one enemy though, too. I mean, there's Rome, and then there's this new gospel coming in, trying to
Right, yes,
change things up.
right,
And so what's the greater enemy?
all right,
We're in the church. And we've got these other people trying to change
mhm,
our sanctuary, our safe place.
right. Yeah, Mike,
this is way out in the weeds, and I
that's okay.
apologize.
You know what, you know how I'm fine with weeds. Go ahead.
So this is big weeds. So the church sees our culture going farther and farther from what we think the gospel is, and therefore we react vehemently.
Mhm,
Talking about our culture now,
mhm,
that, feeling out of our church, feeling out of control of culture and therefore pushing back so horribly
right,
because they want control back.
right.
I'm not articulating it well, but I suddenly saw like current events through this lens of,
You did just fine.
Okay.
And plot twist, you're not out in the weeds at all. You actually wandered right into the heart of the matter.
question.
Anytime a group, this is me speaking as a psychologist, but this is something I teach my intro to psych class. When we look at prejudices give us something. They have a function. They serve us in some way. They give us comfort, they give us security, they give us stability, they give us the feeling that there's somebody else worse off than me, and that makes me feel better. They reinforce self-esteem. And when we're dismantling prejudices, especially when we're in a place where it seems like my dominant culture is being pushed back against, or it's changing, or it's growing, or it's altering in some way, it freaks us out and results in us clinging to it more tightly and then enforcing purity tests.
Here's the
Right.
real sin for me in my heart is that I do not believe that in all the cultural chaos, I'm not trusting that God is still building this church. Therefore, I have to ram it down your throat.
Right.
I think church is, because God's not gonna do it without my help.
Right. Right, and hence the problem that, again, I think the term that they used here were the circumcision group, that's what they were feeling at that moment, right? They wanted people to adhere to the law of Moses. They were enforcing those rules, and they were putting a heavy burden on people who were just not like them to change. Come into the church, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna be safe. You have to change first. which I do not think is actually what Jesus wants us to do. We'll get into that here in just a second. But again, like I said, I think you wandered directly into the heart of the matter. Thank you for spoiling the whole lesson, Mike. Dead on target,
So
sir.
you imagine what that new member class must have looked like then?
I know, it was like, oh, okay, welcome to church, as they're sharpening
Yeah.
the knife, like, Right, and then that's where I back away slowly and then leave. Let's take a quick look at, so we're gonna skip over a couple of those questions, because I really want to get to the rest of this as I'm monitoring our time here. Let's take a look at Galatians 1, verses 10 through 24. And as we're doing this, let's look for those fingerprints of Paul sort of continuing to validate his ministry here. Because remember, he is unhappy, and he is trying to, again, enforce his authority. See if you can see those fingerprints. Who would like to read for us 10 through 24? It's a big chunk, but I know you can do it. You can do hard things.
Am I now seeking human approval or God's approval? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still pleasing people, I would not be a servant of Christ. For I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that the gospel that was proclaimed by me is not of human origin. For I did not receive it from a human source, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. You've heard, no doubt, of my earlier life in Judaism. I was violently persecuting the church of God and was trying to destroy it. I advanced in Judaism beyond many among my people of the same age, for I was far more zealous for the traditions of my ancestors. But when God, who had set me apart before I was born and called me through his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son to me so that I might proclaim him among the Gentiles, I did not confer with any human being, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were already apostles before me, but I went away at once into Arabia, and afterwards I returned to Damascus. Then after 3 years, I did go up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas and stayed with him 15 days, but I did not see any other apostle except James, the Lord's brother. In what I am writing to you before God, I do not lie. Then I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and I was still unknown by sight to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only heard it said, the one who formerly was persecuting us is now proclaiming the faith he once tried to destroy. And they glorified God because of me.
How many of you watched the Star Wars movies? Why is Darth Vader such a compelling character?
His voice.
His voice, right? The James Earl Jones resonance, right? And the redemption story at the end, right? That moment where he sees the Emperor torturing Luke, his son, and he makes that decision, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. And that's, I think, if he had not had that redemption arc, he would have been such a one-dimensional character.
Mm-hmm.
We love redemption stories.
Well, he knew both sides.
All right, he did know both sides very intimately. He understood the call of the light and the power of the dark side.
Yeah.
But he was able to overcome them and bring balance to the force. And we see a lot of the fingerprints of that in the Apostle Paul's story. A Jew among Jews, right? And again, this is the way that he sort of describes himself. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He had this high pedigree. He talks about this in other epistles too. And he is now saying, Jesus is the way. You don't need to be circumcised. Jews and Greeks should eat together because we are all one in Christ. He knows both sides of the story, and he's making this strong argument. This is a really powerful thing to hear, right? Isn't this why it's so important for church leadership to sort of share their personal stories with others? That's kind of what N.T. Wright gets at here. Look at these questions that he asks, and we're on page 11, by the way. So he asks the typical like reading comprehension question, like what criticism had been lodged against Paul. But then and that's in question 5. Then on question 6, how does Paul use his personal story to verify his apostleship? And then question 7 is, what is the value of church leaders honestly telling the stories of their own spiritual journeys? Have you been affected in some way by hearing a church leader tell their own personal story? That had a big moment where something like just kind of clicked for you?
Well, they're speaking from authority,
Okay.
from, you know, just by the fact that the congregation had already heard God's calling on their life and supported that.
Sure.
So that gives their story some validity
Sure.
and worthy of attention.
Becomes less abstract.
Comes with what?
Becomes less abstract.
Less abstract.
Yeah.
We were reading in our book club, the book James, you know, about. The guy that went with Huck Finn,
The slave, Jim.
yeah, Jim.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like it's written from his perspective,
Oh.
and it really made slavery seem so much more.
Worse.
Right.
You understood a lot more than just abstract, well, I'm against slavery. I mean,
Right.
it's so much different when it comes from the authority of someone who has lived it, even though it was a novel, but.
That makes perfect sense, yeah. Any other thoughts?
What immediately came to my head was been there, done that.
Ah, how so, Nancy?
You know, I sort of, if he's talking, I sort of was where you guys were not knowing the real story, but as soon as I figured out what the real story about God is, I changed my life.
Mhm.
So I've been there, I understand you.
I thought it's possible to change. If I can do it, you can do it.
Right. Right.
It's really an extreme example.
Oh, yes, yeah, no, I mean, he might have been considered a terrorist on some
Yeah.
level, was with the behavior that he sort of exhibited to the church, the violence that he engaged in, right? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, my concept of, like authority and being under authority is continuing to evolve.
Sure.
And so the idea of personal experience, Matt, I'm gonna bring up your daughter's sermon. Her message, when she spoke from her personal experience of going through the pain that her family went through, she immediately had authority. That was arresting. It made you really feel, or invited me to feel. And to recognize that she had authority to speak to something that was really true that she'd been through, that, you know, challenged and then like shaped her faith in a good way. And what I'm understanding is like authority, we think, oh, I have authority, I can boss you around, I'm in control.
Right.
It's like, no, more authority is like you've been given something that you're underneath that is a gift for you to give to others. So Marina went through a painful experience. Now she's under authority. She can speak in a way
Right,
that really blesses me and moves me.
sure,
You may not even like it, but
Right.
she's got this power. I mean, she's been given this authority to like help.
that's
And it's
true.
just a different kind of authority.
Gonna get psychological again here really fast, because can't help it. Do you guys, have you heard the difference between authoritative and authoritarian before? This is a term we use in the psychology of parenting. An authoritative parent is warm and kind, but still has authority, but they use it for nurturing and caring purposes. And when they speak, the kid wants to listen because they trust the parent. And an authoritarian parent is do it because I said so, and they enforce or they impose the authority on the child without allowing the natural gravity well of their knowledge do the work for them. We tend to encourage parents to use more authoritative strategies than authoritarian strategies because there's all this research out there about showing how authoritative parenting actually produces positive outcomes versus authoritarian parenting. And I hear that distinction in this conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
You go through something, like you talk about going through what, because I haven't listened to the sermon, so I don't know. But you talk about going through your personal experiences. Paul sounds authoritative, right? I know what I'm talking about. I know that what I did caused harm. I am trying to prevent you from causing harm too. Versus, stop it. Don't do that. Don't ask me why I said so, or I'm going to force you to do this against your will because I genuinely do not care about your point of view. Does that make sense? Fantastic. There was another couple questions here on the back end of his first lesson that we're going to look at this week. If we flip over to page 12, if you're following along with the whole version of the game. So I really love that he asked this question on question 9, and I did want to put this to the group with again an eye to our time here a little bit. Paul was now preaching the faith that he had once tried to destroy. What is the most remarkable and even unlikely conversion to Christ that you have ever seen? Any of you have any interesting stories on that? Because I have a couple funny ones.
When my wife and I were serving at Purdy,
Mhm.
there was a young lady that came to the weekend. And she, just the first evening, she stated straight up,
Mhm.
I'm Wiccan,
Mhm.
I'm here for the food.
Sure.
And so somebody asked her, well, do you realize you may find yourself changing your mind? And she said, I won't change my mind
Mhm.
unless it snows.
Mhm.
Now, this is in October.
Right.
At Purdy down in Gig Harbor area. And the reason she said that was because her brother had died on a day that it had snowed.
Mm,
And it had some Wiccan kind of connections.
sure, yeah.
The next day, Saturday, we were going through the program as usual. And she was sitting at a table facing away from the window, but two of her friends at the same table hollered out her names and they said, look out the window. And she got up and ran to the window
Mhm.
and fell to her knees. And confessed that God was God.
Can't top that.
No. Yeah. Anybody else? Go ahead, Joey.
Well, I'm just thinking of my nieces, my brother and his wife. I think they will probably lean to authoritarian as they raised them. And they've had, several of them have had just a struggle to the reaction to that and the trauma and all that.
Okay.
But two of them are the most faithful in a way that's demonstrated in the way they parent their own children. And so in my mind, I'm seeing that as they overcame the demand to perform with, a transformation inside to be loving and caring. That's it.
Any of you listen to Ben Folds, the musician? He has a song about a friend of his who went to a party, dropped acid, climbed a tree, and came down as a born again Christian. All kinds of interesting pathways to arrive at the cross. So,
Yeah.
and I think that thing is that incident is not isolated. Frank actually knows a friend of his who dropped acid and then became a Christian in the experience. So, and now let's take on that fun note. There are a couple other questions in here about like struggles between the churches, but I think that we're going to tackle a couple of these if we shift our attention now to the chapter 2 passage. Let's take a quick look again as I'm watching my time closely. Who would like to read for us Galatians 2, 1 through 14? don't make Matt do it again. He was very nice.
15 years, I went up again in Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me. I went up in response to a revelation that I laid before them, though only in a private meeting with acknowledged leaders. The gospel that I proclaim among the Gentiles in order to make sure that I was not running or had not run in vain. But even Titus, who was with me, was not compelled to be circumcised, though he was a Greek. But because a false believer secretly brought in, who slipped in to spy on the freedom we have in Christ Jesus, so that they might enslave us, we did not submit to them even for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might always remain with you. And from those who were supposed to be acknowledged leaders, what they actually were makes no difference to me. God shows no partiality. Those leaders contributed nothing to me. On the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel for the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been entrusted with the gospel for the circumcised, for he who worked through Peter, making him an apostle to the circumcised, also worked through me and sending me through me and sending me to the Gentiles. And when James and Cephas and John, who were the acknowledged pillars, recognized the grace that had been given to me, they gave to Barnabas and me the right hand of fellowship, agreeing that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. They asked only one thing, that we remember the poor, which was actually what I was eager to do. But when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face, because he stood self-condemned. For unto certain people came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles, but after they came, he drew back and kept himself separate for fear of the circumcision faction. And the other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were not acting consistently with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas before them all, if you, though a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you compel the Gentiles to live like Jews?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This, I know that Paul gets a lot of criticism in modern theological circles. This passage just makes me love him.
Yeah.
I love what he did and why he did it here. Okay, what do you think? Let's unpack this a little bit. So what do you think the revelation, I went to Jerusalem because I had been given a revelation. What do you think that revelation is that he was bringing to the apostles in Jerusalem? Does it ever explicitly tell us what it is? It really never elaborates, right?
I think we presume that it was that the Gentiles, you know, the revelation that Gentiles don't have to become Jews.
Right.
That he had enough experience maybe in the previous years.
And it's the vibe that I get too, is that I think what he was bringing to them is like, hey, look at what is happening. These churches are popping up. They are receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit, which actually might have been part of it. I bet that they were seeing evidence of that happening. And so he wanted to present this, and then he says he encounters opposition. And the circumcision group, so, and he doesn't say this directly, but he says, you know, Titus was not compelled to be circumcised. Which is a weird thing to put in any text message you send to your friends, just like, I'm gonna text you like, I wasn't compelled to be circumcised today. Like, that's kind of odd, right? I don't think he would have brought that up unless he had been getting pressure to do it. Right? And if you take a look at these other things that he says here in verse 5, we did not submit to them even for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might always remain with you. It sounds like they had, I mean, I'm reading them between the lines here, I admit that, but it sounds like there was a fight. It sounds like there was pressure applied to these new Greek believers to get circumcised. He brought Titus along with him into the Jerusalem church, which might have shocked people that a Greek was amongst Paul's entourage.
Hmm.
And they stood their ground. To the point that the other church leaders looked at what was going on and said, "Oh, we are fighting against God. That never goes well." And changed their tune and gave them what he called the right hand of fellowship. And apparently he had met with Peter and James, who he then describes as reputed pillars of the church. I also really appreciate his attitude of just like, they weren't anything to me. He just sort of was like, "Oh, you're Peter? That's cool. I'm over here doing my own thing. Fine. I don't know who that you are." And he just kind of rolled with it with his own perspective. And then, so he gets, now I'm switching pronouns here, I'm talking about NT, right? If you look at page 14, I mean, he has these first big questions that kind of cover some of the stuff we just talked about. And he mentions like verse 4 refers to slavery, which I think is pretty clearly referring to submitting to Judaizers. And he asks this really interesting question. What rules or behaviors do various people say are necessary today to be a true Christian? What are some of our Christian culture's purity tests that maybe you've been given before? When people are like, "Oh, I don't know." Oh, okay, some interesting facial reactions on that. Maybe a couple unpleasant memories wafting back into people's minds, and that's okay. You don't have to unpack it if you're not comfortable unpacking it. But have you seen some of these tests, Nancy?
Well, I think the first one is, you have to attend church every Sunday.
Ah, yeah, I heard that a lot.
Yeah. You can't be a Christian if you don't go to church every Sunday.
Close your eyes and plug your ears, Matt. How many of us have skipped church because we just needed a day off? Thank you for being honest, John. I'm gonna raise my hands as well. There's some moments where I'm like, I just can't do it today. And it doesn't mean I'm any less of a Christian, right? But yes, I hear that one a lot. And that drive, that feeling of guilt that you get, sometimes even when you're sick, like it's pretty strong.
The culture I grew up in was not just every Sunday, but every Sunday night and every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
when I started when I would experiment with not going, like on either Sunday night or when, I just felt so much like, what's that word, that psychological term? Not resonance, but
cognitive dissonance. Yeah.
dissonance.
Yes.
Just this terrible physical feeling of like,
Yeah.
this is not okay.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking at verse 5 and it says in that phrase, the truth of the gospel.
Yeah.
I mean, that is jumping off the page at me because all these other things are laid on people
Yeah.
at the expense of the truth of the gospel
Yes.
in many cases, right?
Yes. Which is, yes, again, once again, you have stumbled right where Michael has stumbled into the heart of the matter. Exactly. Any other purity tests or like you're not a Christian unless you do this that you've lived through?
You should be witnessing like crazy.
Oh, yes.
I hate it. But yes. Yes.
Believer's baptism.
The believer's baptism. I know that you've had some personal experience with that.
Speaking in tongues.
Speaking in tongues, right?
Or even just being able to participate in communion, because different denominations have different rules about that. And like if you're not Catholic, you can't take communion in the Catholic Church. I know my grandmother was Episcopalian, and in their church, you had to be confirmed in a church. It didn't matter. I mean, we grew up Methodist, you could be Lutheran or whatever, but as long as you went through confirmation, then it was assumed that you were serious enough to be able to take communion. And other churches have zero rules about communion. So there's like whether people can participate in a sacrament or not.
Sure. Yeah.
And who can offer
The sacrament.
communion.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's true too.
Mm. Who can speak and gather in public.
Yeah, that's.
don't sin and don't put anything on top of the Bible. Grandma.
A couple of my personal, oh, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
No, sorry.
No, please, sir, go
I
ahead.
put this down on the communion table this morning, and somebody came by and said,
Don't do that.
that cannot be, whose is this? That cannot be to the table. And of course you respect, but
Sure.
I'm like, well, that's.
Right, because I mean,
interesting thing to call out.
if you put that coffee cup on the community table, a crack will open and hell of
Yeah.
a demon comes out every time, every single time, Joe.
I think where it's challenging.
Sorry about that.
Interesting thing to share.
I think where it's challenging if you have been a part of a more strict religious context
Yeah,
is that when you go away from that and you embrace what you see as different and true, it can be really easy to still take the strictness with you because the new thing you've embraced is so exciting and liberating that you want to latch on to that. And I think what's really hard and where I have a hard time is when we talk about things that are different amongst different groups of believers, some of those things can be actually outright harmful. And some of them are just kind of cultural. And like,
yeah,
we can't say that a Christian church in Africa with people with a different cultural background is going to have the same rules and expectations that somewhere in, the United States does or in East Asia does. And so there's no, we love rules, right? That would be able to say, well, this is just a cultural difference and this is actually wrong. And it's really hard.
yeah.
And so I don't know, it's a sticky place to wade, to give respect for differences and not try to lock down into a single answer, but also to not try to have gates shut to people, which is sometimes part of that.
Yeah.
I found it interesting this morning. I was doing some preparation for my Minute for Mission and just online, I was looking at some stuff and this series of questions popped up
Mhm.
and asked the question, what is the least spiritual country in the world?
Mhm.
And it shocked me, quite
The
honestly.
United States of America.
Hmm?
United States of America.
No. Sweden, they don't even believe in the afterlife.
No, I'm not surprised by that at all. They regularly clock in pretty low
Yeah.
on tests of religiosity.
But so often I think people think of places like Africa
Mhm.
as being
No, yeah, I wouldn't.
more, or even South America or whatever, but yeah, that was different.
So let's take a look at page 15 next. So the issue that's at stake in verses, and this is the sixth question that he asks sort of in this cycle. The inclusion of non-Jewish people in the church, or really the issue of table fellowship, was a really, really big deal culturally for them at the time. And culturally speaking, again, Jews should not eat with Greeks. Greeks would not necessarily want to mingle with Jews. The idea that they were co-mingling with one another was a really, really remarkable thing. And it would have probably been quite shocking to people who were outside of the group. And to the point where, again, we see some Jewish folks show up to the church in Galatia, or I think wherever they were, as they're interacting. And it results in them kind of getting freaked out by the fact that Greeks and Jews are eating together. They start to complain about this, and it results in the Jews sort of segregating themselves back into their original group, right? And this is something that Paul then begins to push back against. Let's take a quick look at question 7 here. How does Paul balance the case for his independent apostleship alongside the case he's arguing for here for unity in the church? And another way to sort of ask that question, how does he deal with the presence of Peter and the presence of Peter and where Peter is misbehaving?
Can you just back up a little second, because
Yeah, sure.
I'm having a hard time kind of, excuse me, envisioning the church. So it sounds like there might have been churches that Paul started that included both Jews and Gentiles, and they were probably together.
Mhm.
But then another Jewish contingent comes. All right, so we're not talking just about a completely Gentile church here. We're talking about Jews and Gentiles.
Right.
All right.
It's a good, my understanding is we had a mixed church.
Yeah.
Peter comes to visit,
Yeah.
and Peter's hanging out in the mixed church, things
Yeah.
going great.
Until more Jewish people.
Peter's entourage
Yeah.
shows up.
Yeah. Right.
And they're like,
Yeah.
And when they have that, reaction, then more of the Jewish believers apparently feel ashamed or embarrassed.
Yeah.
And we start to see old ways reemerge to the point where even Peter, and then Barnabas is like, oh, okay, I guess I gotta go eat with the Jews and I can't hang out with my Greek brothers. And Paul just said, no, I am not doing this. And that's kind of the vibe that we're looking at here, almost like.
And the truth of the gospel then, that he's saying is at stake. What is that truth of the gospel that's at stake?
Right,
Just clarify that again.
that's a great question. Let the open that to the group. What is the truth of the gospel that's at stake here?
Saved by grace.
To be welcomed and accepted.
Right, today's terms is we're all children of God.
Right.
It just really shows the grip, though, of how people are raised.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us, we're kind of in that. We've all been raised, therefore we're in the grip of something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Owl. Go ahead, please.
Well, no, I'm just. I mean, and to break out of that, to kind of transcend it, I mean,
Mhm.
that's more than bootstrapping somehow.
Yep.
But maybe it takes some confrontation like Paul did every once in a while,
Yes.
in addition to kneel time or whatever else you do, you know, I don't know.
Sure, but also I think the trick is because some people could take that argument and then make the argument that assimilation needs to happen, right? To a different, assimilate to something else, assimilate to getting rid of who you are
Right.
on a different plane.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's really hard to like. How do you maintain diversity and letting people be who they are? And just also making sure that no one is shutting out or devaluing another person.
Yeah.
Goes back to what you were saying earlier about what is cultural and what is truth and how you sift through. So like in the Vineyard Church, if I showed up with the flip flops and without the tie and a t-shirt, no one would, we were talking about what are the core, you know, you've got to believe this or behave this way. You know, and if I show up that way here, I get the odd looks. It's like, but that's all cultural. Those are layers of things that don't really matter. Or, you know, maybe they do. I don't think they do. But what is the core of that revelation, that truth, that
And also that there are things that are theological that are not deal breakers, but people can still have different, because I read scripture and I look at something and I'm like, well, I know where I'm reading into this, but I can also see where this other person reads something different into this. And I think I'm right because it's my brain, but like somebody else is thinking they're right too. And so there's that line of like, okay, you're definitely wrong because this definitely goes against the gospel versus, well, there's just different ways to read this. And so different churches have different thoughts about it. And the thing is, it would be the respect and understanding between, I think, is where we don't have a good, because we want to hold on to what we are, right? And so what we don't have the ability to say a lot of times is to step back and say, well, this is the tradition that I live in, and this is where I want to be. And that over there, it's not harmful. I don't get it, but but it's not my place to go and say that they don't live in the space that they live in and believe the things that they believe, as long as it's not causing harm or, that's where obviously I feel like there's kind of a line. But sometimes it's hard to determine where that is. And different people would view harm at different levels, right? Someone would say this isn't harmful, another person would say it is. It's just messy. The church is messy.
Mhm. Yeah, good point.
And then there's the element of trust, but and that you are focused, or we I hope that we're focused enough on God that we don't worry too much about things you're talking about. I mean, too much, right? That we trust that God is leading everybody if they're, when they're engaged with it. But that's so hard to do, because we,
Yeah.
but I'm thinking, I'm sorry, Paul, but I'm thinking about Anthony and his dog.
Mhm.
And the fact that he continues to be present.
Mhm.
And how remarkable
Mhm.
that is. And how difficult it may be for people, some people. And like I sat down with him and tried to have a conversation, and I was blown away because the way that I wanted to interact with him wasn't comfortable to him.
Mhm.
And he spoke about it. And just that how do, like, different cultures, how do we engage and
Right.
respect the individual
It's
and try to overcome the
right.
differences, and it requires we just give up on ourselves in many ways to risk. That's what I was struck with after that conversation. Like, how can I relate to
Right.
him?
We at the college, we call that practicing paradox
Mm,
when we are working with students. Because you know that I don't like to shake hands during the time of fellowship. I have OCD. A lot of my sessions focus on germs and contamination and things like that. So like it's a big I ask me something. I'm gonna be in the bathroom washing my hand. So hard. I saw one of my favorite actors from the TV series Angel, a guy named J. Alvis Richards. Well, we've had some issues with that. We'll do that later. He had an interesting Facebook post where he went up. He was at a red carpet event and he offered to shake the hands of an actress, and the actress didn't really want to shake his hand because she had some anxiety issues, and he sort of interpreted that as the height of rudeness. And I was like, wow, he's not really being very understanding about like neurodiversity issues. But then I realized he's a Black man. And in that community, if you're refusing to shake someone's hand, that could be a sign of prejudice. So he's interpreting it through his lens. I'm interpreting it through my lens of neurodiversity, and there's two worlds colliding in that moment. And that would be an instant where I can love my neighbor the way Jesus loved me sacrificially. And I can shake that person's hand, even though it costs me something to do it. Does that make sense? And I think that that's what, so when we're looking at what Paul is getting at here, and I want to read this straight as I'm monitoring time. I look at this here on page 16, this paragraph where N.T. Wright just said, I just need to explain something. And let me just read this for you guys here really fast. It's hard for Westerners today to see how serious a matter table fellowship was in the early church. If we are eating with colleagues from work, we don't stop to inquire about their ethnic background. A moment's thought, however, will remind us that there have been and continue to be places in the world where if your skin is the wrong color, if you are known to belong to the wrong religion, or perhaps simply if your accent gives you away as the wrong sort of person, there will be some who will not sit down and eat with you. Eating with people is one of the most powerful symbols of association. And then to steal a little story from my brother, he was interviewing after he finished his PhD, he was interviewing at a university that shall remain nameless in the South. And they were very friendly with him until they found out that his wife is from Mexico. And all of a sudden his interactions turned colder. This thing matters, right? And this is the heart of the gospel, I think, and why Paul is making such a pointed fight here. We are not here to show division. We are here to go out of our way and to take the hand of the person who makes us uncomfortable and shake it, even in an environment where we have been trained our entire lives to not do that exact thing. Because when Jesus asks us, I love that Jesus said the two greatest commandments are love God, love your neighbor. And then in John, he modifies it and says, love each other the way I have loved you. And then he turns around and dies. right?
Mm.
And I think that when we're loving each other, there's a sacrificial component because again, it's not easy. It always costs us something, but I think there's joy and also a little bit pain in paying that price when you give a little bit of yourself and bend to make someone else's life a little bit easier.
Do you think that the notion that sounds wrong, the lordship of Jesus, as a unifying element? We like to say Jesus is Lord. Usually we that means we're really tight, with Jesus or something, but I mean, you're suggesting maybe lordship is more than just personal relationship. It's gotta be some sort of glue that can overlook
That's what I was
and
saying.
express Christ
Right.
even beyond our comfort zone.
Right. And I think this goes back to what I said earlier about authoritative versus authoritarian. When we're looking at the lordship of Jesus Christ, it is authoritative because it leads love first. Right. That's maybe a good, oops, I heard a stand noise. Do you have a thought? Go ahead.
No, I'm just looking at a clock.
Because that's what I was also looking at. This is I think that it's a perfect note for us to stop on. For next week, let's do lessons 3 and 4. Somebody else will be teaching. I will close us out at the end of this cycle. Good discussion today. Stay disturbed. Keep digging into it and have a good time. Let's pray real quick so we can let Matt go to do the clock service. God, thank you that you lead with love, and I pray that you will please help us to find ways to love others the way you have loved us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, see you guys next week. Maybe.